Hello there, and welcome to the show. And today I'm going to be talking about Code Lyoko and Witch. Code Lyoko and Witch are two of my favorite animated shows of all time. I grew up watching these shows around the mid to late 2000s, and I loved both shows, and to this day, they are two of my favorite shows. I love the premise of both shows, I love the characters of both shows, and both shows have great storytelling, and both were very fun to watch, and I've rewatched both shows over the years. And today I'm going to be comparing these two shows to see which one was better. Let's talk about it. Code Lyoko follows a group of 5 teenagers who travel to a virtual world to fight an AI named Xana, who's attempting to take over the world, which follows a group of 5 teenagers as well, this time fighting the forces of evil across different dimensions and parallel worlds through the elemental powers of water, fire, earth, air, and later quintessence. Both of these shows have similar premises and the same number of main characters. However, in terms of story, I do feel that Code Lyoko had the more interesting story because the idea of going to a virtual world to fight an AI, especially during the early 2000s, this was such a unique concept back then, and I remember watching Code Lyoko as a kid for the first time. I remember the concept of the supercomputer and traveling to this virtual world. That was just so cool to me, and even though I love the concept of witch and magic and parallel worlds, I'm gonna give this one to Code Lyoko. I think Code Lyoko had the more interesting premise, and as far as storytelling goes, I do think they did a better job at storytelling throughout the duration of their run. A good story also needs good characters, and as far as main characters go, the 5 main characters of Code Lyoko, Odd, Ulrich, Yumi, Aelita, and Jeremy, and the 5 main characters of Witch, Will, Irma, Tarani, Cornelia, and Halen. I think all 5 of these characters are great, each have their own unique, distinct personalities, and the character dynamics are presented pretty well with the main characters as well as with the supporting characters. The supporting cast on Code Lyoko, while minimal, was still pretty impressive. William Dunbar played a great supporting character. Jim Morales, one of my favorite supporting characters of all time, with his iconic catchphrase, which as well had a great supporting cast. Caleb, Blunk, Matt, Elion, just to name a few, I thought they were a solid supporting cast. And the villains as well, I thought Phobos, Narissa as main antagonists were presented pretty well, as well as the supporting antagonists, Cedric, the Knights of Vengeance, the Knights of Destruction, Code Lyoko as well with Xana, even though it was an AI program, essentially a faceless CGI monster before that became an overused trope in later years. The way Xana was presented in Code Lyoko was great. There's this one moment that still lives with me to this day, and it's the end of Code Lyoko's second season, where the Schipazoa is able to defeat Aelita, and Xana essentially takes over the world, and that moment where he wins, that is one of the darkest moments in all of animated history. The way it's presented, built up, the music, the sense of dread and defeat that just takes over the main characters. Xana was such a great villain, even though he was just an AI program. That just goes to show how well written he was. I love the cast on both of these shows, however, just because of Xana, I'm gonna have to give the point to Code Lyoko. I love the main characters on both shows. I love the character dynamics on both shows. However, the antagonist is what puts this over, in my opinion. Our next category will be art/animation. Both of these shows came out in the early to mid 2000s, and in my opinion, both shows hold up pretty well, even though it's been over 20 years since both were released. I love the art on both shows' location and character designs, which, when we see Meridian for the first time as it's taken over by Phobos and the way it's presented as this dark medieval empire, I love the presentation of Meridian and the expansion on Season 2 with Kandrakar. Character designs as well, colors are saturated and vibrant. Code Lyoko, one of the most unique animated shows of all time, in my opinion, in that it incorporates two distinct animation styles: 2D animation for when we're in the real world, and CG animation when we're in Lyoko. And both of these styles were incorporated seamlessly. In my opinion, they played off each other pretty well. And again, seeing this as a kid, the two different animation styles in the same show, was so surreal, and the way they worked together was seamless. I will be the first to admit the CG animation on season 1 wasn't the best, but the quality significantly improved in later seasons. And the monster designs, I thought they were pretty awesome as well, and I love how they changed the character designs in its final season, showing that this is the end game. I love the animation on both shows, and I love the art style of both shows. Both have their own unique, distinct identities. That being said, for uniqueness and being unlike anything that was made at the time, and unlike anything that's been made since, I'm gonna give animation to Code Lyoko. The way 2D animation and CG animation worked together was just incredible and such a unique concept. It was revolutionary in a sense. The animation on Code Lyoko, to this day, over 20 years later, is something that I'm still amazed by. So I'm gonna give animation to Code Lyoko as well. Our next category is music, specifically the opening song. Opening songs really hyped you up for the show. Code Lyoko's opening song, World Without Danger. I like this song. I love the opening instrumental and how it leads into the lyrics and the opening line of "Here we are, going far." I love the opening song of Code Lyoko, which had two opening theme songs, We Are Witch and Witch theme song. Witch theme song, I thought it was a fine song and it definitely fit the show, and the instrumental was pretty cool, especially that solo with the piano keys as they're showing the villains. However, We Are Witch, that punk rock sound, to me is incredible. That punk rock sound was just so awesome. I love rock and roll music. I'm not the biggest punk rock fan, but this punk rock track was incredible. I loved We Are Witch. The opening instrumental guitar riff, and then the opening lyrics, We Are Witch, that just hyped me up for this show. Out of these three songs, We Are Witch is my personal favorite, and that is why I'm giving the music point to Witch on this one. We Are Witch is a classic. I love this song. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and in this case, the premiere, the opening episode of both shows. Code Lyoko's opening episode aired in September of 2003, Teddy Godzilla. The premise of this episode, the school prom is going on. Xana sends a specter to take over a teddy bear that belongs to one of the supporting characters, who's the first character that we ever see on the show, Millie, and the teddy bear becomes Xanified, becomes a giant monster that tries to destroy the school, and our heroes have to basically stop this giant teddy bear. I thought this was a decent episode. It introduced some of the storyline threads that would be resolved within the first season, such as Aelita's materialization program, and introduced the concept of Xana and the Spectres. It introduced some of the supporting cast, and showed us our primary locations for the show, Kadak Academy, the factory, Lyoko, and introduced the return to the past mechanic, which was just such a cool concept. This episode did a decent job at establishing the main foundation of the show and the formula the show would follow throughout its run. However, I didn't like that we were just thrown into the action. Now, they would release a special a couple of years after this, Xana Awakens, which would serve as the official introduction to the show. This was still a fine episode. Witch's first episode, It Begins, aired in October of 2004, opened with a narration establishing the world we're in. It showed Meridian, the rebels invading the castle, and established the enemies, Phobos, Cedric, and the escape. I thought the opening was very effective. It showed our protagonist protagonists, how Will is the new girl in town, and she's trying to make friends. She meets the other 4 girls. They all get their elemental powers, and they learn about the concept of Meridian. There's a pretty cool training sequence where they learn how to use their powers. This episode also had funnier moments, in my opinion, than Code Lyoko's premiere. These are both good episodes, however, I feel that It Begins, as an opening episode, did a far better job at establishing the world of the show than Code Lyoko's opening episode. It Begins, we got to see our 5 main characters transform, use their powers. We got a solid understanding of like who the major players are and what the stakes were. So I feel that Code Lyoko, even though it was a fine premiere, Witch's premiere did a better job at establishing the world of the show, and that is why I'm giving this point to Witch. Every great beginning should have a great ending. The finales of both shows, starting with Code Lyoko, which aired sometime around November of 2007, Echoes. Xana is defeated in the penultimate episode of the show. Echoes is essentially a recap episode. They're debating on whether or not they should shut down the supercomputer, which is the gateway to Lyoko, being that it has no reason to be operational anymore. However, the group has some reservations about shutting down the supercomputer because it's the symbol of their friendship. And to me, the opening of Echoes is very impactful. The musical choice, the somber tone, and the fact that this thing that symbolizes their friendship and their bond, being forced to shut it down. And over the duration of the episode, we see flashbacks and every main character gives their perspective. And to me, Echoes is such an impactful finale. And the moment where they finally shut down the supercomputer, that was such an emotional moment for me as a kid watching it for the first time, because it literally was the final chapter on one of my favorite shows. And I love that the final lines of this show were Jim saying his iconic "I'd rather not talk about it" line, and then Odd just saying "so long" doing one of these. And our final shot is the Lyoko warriors on Lyoko. I loved the ending to Code Lyoko, and Echoes one of Code Lyoko's best episodes in my opinion, and one of the best finales to a show I have ever seen. Even though it's been 18 years, to me this ending still holds up to this day. I loved Echoes. What a great final episode. Witch's final episode, Z is for Zenith, which aired in December of 2006, opens with the Guardians in a void not knowing who they are. All of them lost their memories. And then we get a flashback to the Battle of Kandrakar after Cedric absorbed Phobos' powers, and now he's attacking Earth, and how this episode essentially becomes Witch versus Cedric, and then Super Witch versus Cedric. Phobos returning in Season 2 and double-crossing Witch, taking over Nurse's powers, and then the twist from the previous episode of Cedric absorbing Phobos' powers. I legitimately did not see that twist coming. I thought that was a great twist, and Cedric being the final villain after not being involved in the final battle of the first season. I thought this was a great comeback for Cedric. The actual battle between Cedric and Witch was pretty cool in my opinion, and I love how it takes place in Heatherfield instead of Meridian or Kandrakar, and the ending with the twist where Narissa escapes and we get this montage of her taking over the world, but then we cut forward and we see it's all in her head and she's still trapped and everyone else escaped, and Witch are brought back to reality, and the closing monologue by Will. To me, that was all done very well. Z is for Zenith is also a great finale. And the ending, I love how it wrapped up the events of Season 2 and still left the door open for a third season, which I am still hoping we get someday. I know it's been over 19 years since Witch ended, but I would love to see a third season of this show. It was great, and I genuinely feel there would have been another great story to tell with these characters. Witch was such a great show, and this was an excellent finale. And although regaining their humanity was a great moment, as far as finales go, I have to give this to Echoes. Echoes is one of my favorite finales ever. As much as Z is for Zenith is a great finale, Echoes is the better finale in my opinion. They say always bring your A game. Now that we've talked about the premiere, we've talked about the finale, let's talk about the best episodes of both shows, starting off with Witch's best episode. And this is according to IMDb. With a rating of 9 out of 10, Season 1, Episode 26, The Final Battle. This is the final assault on Meridian, Witch rescuing Elion and defeating Phobos. a fully powered Phobos after he absorbed Elyon's powers. The build and the lead up to this was done very well in my opinion. The rebels traveling between Meridian through Earth, the build up to that throughout the previous episode after the rebel rescue in an earlier episode was done very well in my opinion. And I like that they showed some of the planning stages of this assault, making this really feel like the big final showdown, which it definitely felt like a big final showdown. When Phobos is defeated and the evil leaves Meridian and how it reverts to the kingdom it once was, filled with life and good. That was a great way to end this story. And then the final frame of Mage looking over Phobos and his forces in prison, and the closing line being, "Now it begins," setting up season 2. That was done very well in my opinion. I think this is a great episode. However, I do wish the actual fight between the Guardians and Phobos was a little longer. That's my only critique of this episode. Code Lyoko's best episode, Season 4, Episode 29, with a rating of 9.3 out of 10. Fight to the finish. The penultimate episode of Code Lyoko, the Lyoko warriors are protecting Franz Hopper as he's attempting to destroy the replicas, which in turn will destroy Xana. Some of the highlights: William trying to get back in the good graces of the Lyoko warriors after being Xanafied for the majority of Season 4, Ulrich defeating the Colossus, Ulrich and Yumi fighting as Xanafied William in the real world, Odd and Aelita protecting Franz Hopper, Xana being destroyed, Franz sacrificing himself, and Aelita crying after Franz sacrificed himself. That was such an emotionally powerful moment. And the final frame of Aelita stepping out of the scanner and how there's no dialogue, just music, the emotion, just on the reactions and the music. That in itself told the entire story. The final scene of Fight to the Finish in the virtualization room was such a great way to end the penultimate episode. After everything is defeated, it's just a quiet moment to let everything just sink in. This was done incredibly well in my opinion. I will say though, I do wish that we got to see William fighting alongside the Lyoko warriors. These are two great episodes in my opinion, but if I were to choose a best, it would have to be Fight to the Finish. Fight to the Finish is such a great episode. I absolutely love it, and it is my pick for the winner of this round. And now we move on to the worst episodes of both shows. And just to be clear, these are not bad episodes. These are just the lowest rated episodes on IMDb. Starting off with Code Lyoko, we actually have a tie for the worst episode of Code Lyoko, both with a rating of 7.6 out of 10. Season 1, Episode 2, Seeing is Believing, and Season 1, Episode 5, Big Bug. Seeing is Believing, Odd, Ulrich, and Yumi are trying to establish a band, and there's power outages going on because of Xana. We get a little more development with the materialization program. Big Bug, Xana takes over the computer system of the entire country, and he sets 2 trains on a collision course, and the Lyoko warriors have to stop it. Code Lyoko's first season definitely had a few episodes that I could consider filler. Definitely the weakest season of Code Lyoko. These are fine episodes, however, compared to the rest of the show, I could see why these are the lowest rated episodes of the show, and to me, they're not really the best of Code Lyoko. Witch's lowest rated episode with a rating of 7 out of 10. Season 2, Episode 18, R is for Relentless. The premise of this episode: the Knights of Destruction are chasing Yan Lin as she is the final guardian that Nerissa needs to reestablish her old group. And this episode shows Hei-Lin's paranoia, trying to protect her grandmother, going from different world to different world, trying to protect her grandmother at the cost of her friends. I actually really like this episode. It did a great job at showing the paranoia of Hei-Lin, the lengths that she will go to protect her grandmother, as well as the lead up to Nerissa getting the last piece that she needs to set her master plan into action. So looking at these 3 episodes, I would say that R is for Relentless, even though it's the lowest rated one of these 3, might actually be the best one in my opinion, as it has more important storyline implications. That is why I'm giving the point on this category to Witch. And that, of course, brings us to our final category, overall enjoyment. I loved both of these shows as a kid. I love both of these shows to this day as an adult. I love the story of both shows. I love the characters of both shows. I love the music in both shows. Both shows have great comedy. Both shows have some pretty cool action sequences. Both shows have interesting premises. I enjoy the character dynamics. I was emotionally invested in both shows. All that being said, looking at both of these shows overall, I was more emotionally invested in Code Lyoko, and I had more fun watching Code Lyoko than Witch. I was more invested in the characters of Code Lyoko, the story of the show, the premise was just so interesting to me that I found myself more invested in Code Lyoko than Witch, and I had more fun watching Code Lyoko than I did Witch. That being said, Witch is a great show and one of my favorite shows. I love both of these shows. However, I am gonna have to give the win to Code Lyoko. Code Lyoko defeats Switch and wins and is the better of the two shows. If you have not watched either show, do yourself a favor. Watch Code Lyoko and watch Switch. They are two great shows and they are worth your time. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You can follow me on Instagram at Said_2000 and I will see you on the next video. Till then, take care.